Bonjour à tous.
Bonjour. Bonjour à tous, bienvenue. On laisse rentrer tranquillement les participants et on va pouvoir attaquer dans 30 secondes. Bonjour à tous. Bon, je crois qu'on peut commencer. Bienvenue à ce talk 3 de la semaine de l'Observatoire Climate Change, donc, qui est organisé dans le cadre de la publication du bilan mondial de l'action climat 2021, qui a été publié lundi. Donc, juste un petit point technique avant de commencer, bien penser à fermer vos micros lorsque vous ne parlez pas. Puisqu'on est en Zoom meeting, donc on pourra, ça sera plus facile comme ça pour prendre des questions à la fin de l'atelier. Pour les intervenants, bien penser à parler lentement, puisque cette session est directement interprétée en anglais. Et donc, d'ailleurs, pour ceux qui le veulent, vous pouvez cliquer sur le bouton interprétation en bas de votre écran pour bénéficier de la traduction en anglais. You can click on the globe down the screen to listen this talk in English. So, je pense qu'on va pouvoir commencer. Donc, je vais laisser tout de suite la parole à ma collègue Marine Brunier qui va nous présenter un petit peu, déjà nous rappeler ce qu'est l'association Climate Change et ce bilan de l'action climat, et puis donner un peu les principaux enseignements tirés de ce bilan qui sont propres aux technologies de rupture. Hop là. Et moi, ça tombe bien, je vais couper mon micro parce qu'il y a des travaux qui commencent à côté de la pièce où je suis. Donc, Marine, c'est à toi.
Alors, bonjour à toutes et à tous. Bienvenue dans ce débat Climate Change consacré à la question capture du carbone, hydrogène, batterie de stockage, les technologies de rupture, bientôt à l'âge de la maturité. Alors, est-ce que je peux passer les slides comme ça? Ouais. Alors, une petite seconde. Où est-ce que ça va passer mes notes? Là. Donc, on est ici dans le cadre de la publication de l'édition 2021 du bilan de l'action climat par secteur de l'Observatoire Climate Change. Donc, dans un premier temps, je vais vous présenter l'association, son observatoire, ainsi que cette édition 2021 du bilan sectoriel. Ensuite, je ferai une présentation des grands enseignements du bilan et on consacrera 1 heure à la table ronde avec les différents intervenants. Ouais, voilà, ça demande un petit peu de gestuelle. Hop, voilà. Alors, donc ce rapport, il se concentre sur l'implémentation plutôt que sur les engagements et les déclarations. Donc, l'objectif derrière, c'est de raconter l'histoire de l'action climatique derrière des chiffres et des émissions de gaz à effet de serre en nous appuyant sur des études et des rapports spécialisés. Donc, le bilan mondial, c'est la seule publication à ce jour qui offre une synthèse globale de la façon dont les entreprises, les gouvernements locaux et régionaux, mais aussi la société civile ont agi au cours de l'année pour réduire les émissions de gaz à effet de serre, donc à travers les 6 principaux secteurs d'émissions que sont l'énergie, le transport, les bâtiments, l'industrie, les déchets et l'usage des sols. Donc, à l'Observatoire, on regarde le monde tel qu'il est et non tel qu'il devrait être ou tel que nous aimerions le voir. Alors, pour cette année, pour sa 4e édition, le bilan a fait peau neuve et organise son analyse des secteurs d'émissions en 4 nouvelles rubriques. Donc, vous pouvez retrouver notamment des indicateurs qui se présentent sous la forme d'une double page au début de chaque secteur et qui permettent de dresser un tableau général de l'évolution des émissions et de l'action climat dans chaque secteur. On retrouve aussi des tendances qui sont donc le cœur de l'analyse de chaque secteur. Elles portent sur un sous-secteur en particulier. Donc, par exemple, ici, vous pouvez retrouver la tendance sur les métaux stratégiques pour la décarbonation. Elles permettent d'une part de faire l'état des lieux de l'évolution des émissions et des grandes tendances de l'action dans ce sous-secteur, dans ce qu'on appelle donc le panorama des données. Et ensuite, de faire un focus sur ce qui nous a semblé être un aspect important de l'action climat mondiale dans ce sous-secteur que vous pouvez retrouver dans l'œil de l'observatoire. Ensuite, on retrouve la rubrique signaux qui propose un tour du monde des initiatives, des changements de réglementation et des transformations de marché qui préfigurent aujourd'hui les tendances de l'action climat de demain. Donc, elle se présente sous la forme d'une revue de presse qui est constituée à partir de la veille de l'observatoire qu'on effectue tout au long de l'année. Enfin, vous pouvez retrouver des cas d'études qui sont au nombre de 3 par secteur et qui permettent de mettre en avant des bonnes pratiques au niveau global, souvent issues des gouvernements locaux, mais aussi d'ONG ou d'initiatives multi-acteurs. Donc, le résumé du bilan a été publié le 8 novembre à la COP26 et il a été présenté en conférence de presse. Donc, il est construit autour de 10 points clés pour aider à donner un sens aux tendances de l'année passée en matière d'action climatique et d'évolution des émissions. Alors, cette complexité, elle peut être résumée en une phrase, en un titre, « Retour vers le futur 2021, la grande accélération de l'action climatique et des émissions ». Donc, en effet, la reprise des activités après le choc de la pandémie fait apparaître 2 tendances générales aux apparences encore contradictoires. Donc, d'un côté, l'action climat qui s'accélère. Donc, on a vu l'installation massive d'énergie renouvelable, l'adoption de la mobilité électrique, beaucoup d'engagement dans la neutralité carbone, la volonté de développer des technologies de rupture pour la transition. Mais d'un autre côté, force est de constater que malgré ces tendances encourageantes, les émissions repartent à la hausse. Et les nombreux engagements des États et des entreprises ne mettent toujours pas le monde sur une trajectoire compatible avec l'accord de Paris. Donc, ce bilan sectoriel, il tente d'expliquer la cohabitation de ces 2 tendances qui sont divergentes et il tente de rendre compte de la complexité de cette période. Alors, une tendance qu'on a observée, c'est que le secteur industriel peine à se décarboner. En 2018, l'industrie représentait encore 24% des émissions de gaz à effet de serre au niveau mondial et 65% de ces émissions provenaient de la production d'acier, de la chimie et du ciment. Alors, on a vu l'apparition de grandes technologies de rupture qui font la promesse de décarboner l'industrie lourde, que sont donc le CCS, donc la capture et le stockage du carbone, et l'hydrogène. Donc, avec la neutralité carbone comme nouvel objectif climatique, les entreprises et les gouvernements se sont positionnés sur ces technologies de rupture. Donc, malgré le fait qu'il ait été laissé de côté pendant une longue période, le CCS regagne peu à peu de la légitimité. En 2050, le CCS devrait capturer 7 gigatonnes de CO2. Et dans le scénario net zéro de l'Agence internationale de l'énergie, comme on peut le voir sur cette slide, l'industrie serait le secteur qui devrait bénéficier le plus largement du CCS en 2050. Donc, le CCUS, le CCS, on emploie les deux de façon un petit peu alternative. Donc, le CCUS, qui comprend aussi l'utilisation du CO2, atteint un véritable tournant, mais son utilisation à des fins de décarbonation reste encore marginale. Alors, entre 2017 et 2020, ce sont plus de 30 projets de CCS qui ont été annoncés avec une capacité de stockage annuelle de 130 mégatonnes. Aujourd'hui, au niveau mondial, on compte environ 65 projets de CCUS qui permettent de stocker 40 mégatonnes de CO2 chaque année. Alors, ces 2 dernières années, on a vu un boom sans précédent des investissements dans le CCUS, des investissements qui ont été majoritairement portés par le secteur du oil and gas. En 2020, on a vu une hausse des investissements de 212% dans le CCUS par rapport à 2019. Sur les 26 projets qui sont actuellement en opération, 20 sont financés par l'EOR, donc la récupération assistée du pétrole grâce au CO2 qui est donc récupéré et injecté.
CO2 being captured and reinjected, these investments were driven by the oil and gas sector, for which CCNS has become the third costs or spending. For the coming decades, more than 50% of this project will be financed by members of the International Association of the Oil and Gas Production. CCUS is also drawing the interest of carbon-heavy industries. We see this mainly through the Longship project, which is a result, the outcome of a collaboration between the government, the industry, and oil companies. Longship project will decarbonize the waste treatment industry or factory, and the Bredig factory, 9,000 tons of CO2. The CCUS project, which is being developed, should be able to capture 400,000 tons of CO2 per year. The CCUS is still facing significant obstacles, especially the economic uncertainty, of course, with the 2018 2008 economic crisis, and the current pandemic. The Petra Nova project, which is a US project based on EOR, was put on hold because of the fall of oil prices in 2020. This is a technology that is still largely unknown to the general public, and that is generating some concerns over the risks, especially leakage, possible leakage. CCUS seems to be a wonderful opportunity for hydrogen, however, that could benefit from it. By 2050, 1.8 megatons of carbon could be captured. So the hydrogen also has known a tremendous momentum in 2020 and 2021. This technology has a strong public support. In 2021, 17 states have actually adopted a hydrogen strategy compared to only 3 in 2019. Also, we have noticed that fundings have flourished for blue and green hydrogen production. For example, the Egyptian government, as part of the Energy Strategy 2035, has announced their intent to invest $4 billion in producing green hydrogen in partnership with Siemens, according to Energy Policy Tracker since the beginning of the pandemic, and as part of the recovery plans. About 10 countries in the European Union have committed to invest around $20 billion in hydrogen. Low carbon hydrogen production is still in its nascent stage. In 2018, the production of hydrogen was overall was still responsible for emitting about 830 megatons of CO2, and green hydrogen represents less than 1% of the total hydrogen production. We see here that green hydrogen industry is still far off track. This energy is still not competitive and will take some time to be so compared to blue or brown hydrogen, which emit quite a bit of or consume a lot of energy. Green hydrogen still has a few drawbacks compared to blue hydrogen. The installations of blue hydrogen produce wider, larger volumes. In comparison, the projects of blue hydrogen productions are more numerous, but their overall capacity remains small. We also ran a case study regarding the hydrogen fuel and the flame of the use of hydrogen fuels as part of the Tokyo Olympic Games. Tokyo or Japan has a project for hydrogen economy, and it was the first country to publish this project in 2017. In 2020, there were already 116 hydrogen stations that were already operational. Therefore, the Olympic Games were to start the hydrogen society with a village 100% dependent on hydrogen. Yet the Olympic Games showed the fragility of this energy, and we saw the limits. The 100 and so buses which were supposed to run during the Olympic Games were not used in the end for several reasons. There was a station, the station costs are about 5 times higher than a conventional refueling station. And while a fuel cell bus as supplied by Toyota costs 4 to 5 times as much as a diesel bus. Therefore, Japan is trying to stimulate interstate cooperation to create an international supply chain to allow this energy to be competitive. Parallel to this upswing of hydrogen, we've also seen a rise of ammonia, which could be presented as an alternative form of hydrogen for the energy transition with some characteristics which are more easily transportable. Hydrogen could be compressed, ammonia can be compressed at a less degrees Celsius. It is also cheaper to transport, and the combustion only requires water and nitrogen. Ammonia is presented as a magic tool to decarbonize the maritime sector. The hydrogen-powered electric propulsion is an object of high expectation in the sector. More and more actors are thinking of using ammonia as an alternative fuel, similar to hydrogen for transport or in power plants, for example, or in the maritime sector. However, the energy density of ammonia is lower than that of oil, so much so that converting the entire international fleet would actually mean tripling the production to reach 440 million tons, which would require no less than 750 gigawatts of renewable electricity. I'm now going to give the floor to my colleague, Samuel Laval, who will introduce our speakers for today. Thank you for your attention. Thank you, Marine. Thank you for your presentation. I think we can stop the screen sharing, and then we can start talking about these various technologies with our 4 speakers. For today, we have the pleasure of having with us François Legalland, director of the CA Liten in Grenoble, Julien Armijo, energy technology analyst, specialized in hydrogen and alternative technologies, Jean-Patrick Masson, vice president of Dijon Métropole, and he will be talking about the project for the production and the use of hydrogen in Dijon, and Elise, she's a senior business development advisor at Northern Lights for CCUS. We're glad to have you with us today. We will now start and try to understand during this roundtable, where are we at with the disruptive technologies. This word disruptive really shows the fact that for the moment, these technologies, whether it be green hydrogen or CCUS, are not yet completely adopted by stakeholders, and they raise questions as to their deployment. Hydrogen, of course, is very much used already, but with the green model, and that would be a disruption because these uses are still a minority concerning oil refinery, etc., and through renewable energies. This is still a minority. So the purpose of our roundtable today is to try to understand together where are we at with these new technologies. There seems to be a real upswing for the last year or so, or 2 years. How can this be how can this become more concrete in the coming years? Is this mainly announcements, or are we really at a turning point, whether it be for hydrogen or CCUS? Let's start now with our first speaker, and I'm going to ask Mr. Jean-Patrick Masson, Vice President of the Dijon Metropole. And you were actually at the COP26. We didn't actually meet there, but I know you met some of our colleagues, Antoine and others. During the COP, you were there for presenting the project of Dijon. As Marine was saying, we will be talking about Tokyo, who published a strategy, an ambitious strategy for hydrogen, and tried to implement it during the Olympic Games. However, it's important to talk about difficulties. Could you explain to us what it's like in Dijon and why the metropole chose hydrogen? Go.
Bonjour à toutes et à tous. Alors, Dijon, pour présenter rapidement.
Good morning, everyone. So just to give you a quick overview, it's a city of about 260,000 people, but a mid-sized city compared to other cities, I guess. And our way of thinking is to really choose to fight against climate change and to adapt in this context. Excuse me, it's 160,000 people. And it's quite a diverse urban area. We have various public transportation options. The civil service in the city is adapted and is very well developed. We have a tramway which has about 10% use of renewable energy, and we also have a bus network that usually uses hybrid buses or gas buses, so LNG buses. So over the past 20 years, during which I've been elected official, each time that we renewed our PT fleet and also civil service fleet, we looked at what would be the best technological answer to really reduce our GHGs. Also, we looked at sound pollution reduction mechanisms, and also other GHGs, for example, ozone and other possibly harmful components. So we're really behind all this. So coming back to really the topic of this morning's talk, hydrogen. There are many reasons which led us to make this choice. So we started in 2019. We were a little bit less advanced than the Japanese. We started to work 2019, as I said, because firstly, we wanted to renew our 2 fleets. So the waste, the bin lorries and also public transportation buses. And we saw that the big difficulty was in the bin lorries. Why is that? Because we work a lot in circular economy. So we collect the waste, and then we try to do a triage with the waste. And we look after this from not only the operational side, but also the management side. And then we have a lot of electricity. We have to keep in mind that we have, because of the size of the city, there is actually quite a lot of energy emitted. So we also incinerate waste. So we then therefore produce CO2, and and then this allows us to use this to power the lorries. So it's a very virtuous cycle. Other technical considerations are the following. We compared an electric bin lorry and a hydrogen bin lorry, because we have to keep in mind that both of these types of vehicles are electric motors. Batteries are very heavy. So this did not allow, because the battery is so heavy, we couldn't charge the trucks or fill up the trucks as much as we wanted to. So this was one of the disadvantages. So this led to more vehicles necessary. Another problem with these bin lorries is that each time it stops, you have to start up again each time after every house. So it's a lot of use. It's a hilly area. We have winters here. All of these are the difficulties that we faced. And it also increased the time that the lorries are out on the street. So we wanted to really make sure that we were as efficient as possible. This was the same context that we had to look at when we were choosing the buses. Because what we were thinking about was that the new type of vehicles, we really had to make sure that the person in charge of these tasks, so on one hand the waste management, on the other hand the PT, we didn't want to have a very big change through this renewal. So we wanted to make sure that we could reduce the amount of time that bin lorries were on the street and to have their volume as large as possible. This was also for the buses. So we have 180 buses and 40 bin lorries to renew. So it's about 220 vehicles in total which will be purchased, and this up until 2030. So we're really moving forward quickly. So it seems about 30 purchased vehicles per year. Another choice that we made was that because we were actually supplying electricity, and with the various limits that are in place in France concerning distribution networks and etc., this was a constraint, because there's 100 meters between the incineration station and the renewal station. So we have to use the electricity network. And we had to therefore, to avoid using the network, we had to bury a cable about 100 meters underground. So we had to really make sure that production and distribution of hydrogen was well managed. It was very important for us because we had experience in such revolutions, for example, in building heating, either directly or either through our subcontractors. We're trying to really master how we're moving forward from this energy point of view to make sure that our adaptation towards green energy is as quick as possible, keeping in mind all technological advancements. And we also have a solar farm very close to the site, which will allow us to evolve quickly, use hydrogen as a type of turbocharger within the fleet. So this solar park will be used to produce the hydrogen. Yes, that's true. So we had various constraints and issues that we had to look at. So thank you very much. I'm going to have to cut you off. 1 second. So to be able to achieve our goals, we did a PPP. And we're also then shareholder in this undertaking. So we'll look at that in a second question concerning funding of projects and how local governments do this and with the PPPs. So I'd like to give the floor to Julien Armijo, who is working at the IEA. So we saw that within the Grenoble context, they were producing and using hydrogen, which was then centered on mobility. In the Global Hydrogen Review report that you published a few weeks ago, maybe in October, you really showcased the various uses of hydrogen to really achieve decarbonization. So, Julien, can you tell us a bit more about this report and see what are the takeaways, and especially concerning the use of hydrogen? What are the uses that the IEA is actually looking at in the current rollout trends? Thank you, and hello to everyone, and thank you for this invitation. Good morning to everyone. So I'd like to put up a few graphs here. These are from the Global Hydrogen Review that we did publish in October. So for your first question concerning uses, can we see my slides? It looks as if it's possible. Yes. Okay, yes, you can see my slides. In fact, so hydrogen has come back onto the global debate stage as concerning electricity. But that's what we see at the IEA. We've seen this for various reasons. Many governments have made national strategy announcements concerning hydrogen. These plans forecast that hydrogen should make up about 15 to 20% of the final electricity mix pursuant to uses. We also see that there is some movements or is starting to become important for international and also for company uses. So at IEA, we published a report in May of this year called Net Zero 2050. So it was quite novel because it was the first time that we put together a scenario taking into account the 1.5 Celsius benchmark that many NGOs are using. So on this graph, you can see hydrogen consumption's role in attaining this net zero 2050 goal. So we can see here that this is concerning consumption. Hydrogen worldwide is about 80 tons of hydrogen is used yearly, especially in refinery and industry, especially in oil and gas, and a little bit in the steel industry. So nowadays, we could say that hydrogen is really one of the subsectors compared to fossil fuel use. So in this net zero scenario, hydrogen will increase sixfold and should have about 500 megaton by 2050. Main growth should be witnessed in the new use area. We'll see that in refining, it's going down up to almost to zero by 2050. Increasing uses will be in the industrial and transportation sectors, especially in heavy transportation and industries. It will also be used, but to a very small extent in buildings and in the electricity sector. Hydrogen has to be used for the balancing in electricity systems, not only for absorption or reabsorption, but also for long-term storage. So let's go into the details. So we'll look in the main sectors concerning these new uses. So long-distance transportation and industrial uses. So these graphs are also from our report Net Zero by 2050. So hydrogen is in dark blue or kind of a green color, greenish blue color. You can see ammonia light blue and synthetic fuel in yellow. So for rail uses, we see that it's not used too much. For maritime shipping, we can see that it will play a very important role. It would represent 2.5% of CO2 emissions in this sector. And we can see that ammonia represents 60% of the fuel used in 2050 in this scenario. So it mainly will be ammonia because it has various advantages concerning storage and transport and also production. In the aviation sector, it will also play a role, but especially as a synthetic fuel in yellow here on the right. We can see that the scenario forecasts 30% use by 2050. And there will also be a link up of hydrogen and CO2 fuels. So now for industrial uses. So it's in light, hydrogen will be in light green. It will be mainly very important in the steel business and also in oil and gas, so production of oil and gas. So these are the two important new sectors for hydrogen. So coming back to one of your questions, which was, what are the current rollout trends? So if we compare the scenario and the actual state of affairs, so we're quite late, if you like. We're lagging behind a bit. So we see here on the left, that's the current pledges scenario, and on the right, we see the net zero scenario by 2050. We can therefore see for hydrogen consumption that by 2050 for the current announcements, we only achieve 50% of what we need for net zero emissions, and especially short-term basis to achieve net zero, we'd have to be at 200 megatons by 2030 consumed annual, and we're at right now about 120. So it's here on this pie chart on the right, you can see what I just spoke about, 120 megatons. So you see here on the left current trends, on the right government pledges. So this foresees quite a significant increase between the 105 and 120 megatons. So these are current trends, because the announcements do not actually correspond all the time to the trends. You can see here on the left that the new uses are actually in yellow are quite small, whereas concerning pledges made, we can see that the yellow part of the pie chart grows quite a lot. So growth is on the books, but it's insufficient. So I'd like to give the floor to the next speaker. So you've spoken about uses in long distance transport. So do you forecast in this 2050 net zero case, what do you see for long distance transportation? So for example, in Grenoble, and not only long distance transport, but also short distance transport. Yes. So hydrogen makes sense, if I can say it in a semantic way. It makes sense for heavy or long distance transportation. Why heavy or long distance? Because hydrogen is more advantageous than normal battery powered vehicles, because batteries are very, very heavy, and they somehow penalize the long distance transportation needs, as was said previously. So for example, urban waste management fleets or public transport may make sense, because even if the distances are quite short, we know that they need a lot of takeoff energy, so meaning they're starting up all the time. And if that's the case, hydrogen makes sense. If you're able to recharge easily and frequently, in that case, it's better to use normal batteries. So thank you very much. We were able to link up what's all the various topics. So we've seen the various interests and challenges of hydrogen use.
À Grenoble. Donc on parlait justement des stratégies hydrogène qui se déploient de plus en plus. Donc la France.
We've been talking about hydrogen technologies. France announced its strategy in 2019, and Emmanuel Macron, a few weeks ago, visited Genevia company. If I understand well, they produce electrolyzers, which was launched by the CEA Liten. We talked about 10 years ago about the change of group from the CEA to alternative energies, as well as just being a CEA only. What is the place today of this new name for alternative energies as part of the CEA group, and what place does hydrogen have, or what role does hydrogen play at CEA? Thank you, and hello everyone. Thank you for inviting me. Indeed, our company is a joint venture which was funded some months ago now between the CEA, Vinci, Vica, and the Occitanie region. As you said rightly, this is a company that wants to industrialize a electrolyze technology that was developed about 15 years ago within the CA labs. If you look at emissions, and you mentioned the CEA, including now renewable energy, both in the name, it's not just a change of name, it's also our missions, our assignments, which public authorities have asked us to carry out. As part of our missions, we have two things, two goals: to bring to the market necessary innovations in order to reach net zero by 2050, and also a mission of reindustrialization in France. Our CEA project actually reaches both goals to decrease emission, and we see a difference there. Yet there is another topic, which is the industrialization of the nation. We have a new factory being built on site that will be generating employment, which was necessary also in that region of France. Now, if we want to look at hydrogen, more generally speaking, it's a huge topic for us. There is much innovation in this field. Coming back to the IEA report with the net zero that Julien was presenting, one thing in particular, there was a clear mapping of all the new technologies necessary to reach net zero by 2050. Half of these technologies are not actually at a level of maturity needed. At the same time, there is uncertainty, but yet there is a huge place for innovation to bring about new technologies, new topics, to develop new sectors, and to create innovation and develop new sectors. Hydrogen, of course, is a good example. The CEA is very much present along this line, this chain. If we want to have decarbonated hydrogen, it's an important aspect. At the moment, hydrogen is done with a particular technology. Only a little part of hydrogen is decarbonated. First, we need to produce decarbonated hydrogen electricity. We are, of course, as CEA, very much present in this field. We also work on another topic, which are the PV plants. For the last 20 years, we're very much committed to this. Both we have innovation for decarbonated projects, and on the other hand, we are working on technologies for decarbonized hydrogen. In R&D, also topics around storage, transport. We have carried out works as to the transportation of hydrogen, how to transport it, what kind of materials, what can we use. Much research is being done on the impact of hydrogen on metals or materials. Also much work is being done on ammonia, cryo, and liquid organic hydrogen carriers. These are also other options. We are also carrying out research on pressurized gas, 700 bars reservoir, and other topics regarding the use, of course, of hydrogen with other activities on batteries. We are working on the technologies regarding batteries, high temperature technologies, and of course, the use of decarbonated hydrogen. We were talking about cement earlier on, steel factories, the power twigs using hydrogen, decarbonated hydrogen. And we talked also of mobility. We were talking with Julien and others about heavy mobility when it requires much more energy. utility vehicles, whether they'd be ships and boats, garbage trucks, all this kind of mobility. And then the other aspect is the storage of renewables, which is one of the levers. Of course, there are others in order to start using renewable energy. This is a wide scope with different directions applied. The Research Institute on Renewable the 700 bars reservoirs and high temperatures. We are working on this with much expertise. So this is mobilizing a lot of our staff at the CEA. I don't know if I answered your questions. Did I? Sorry, I muted my mic. I had muted. Yes, this answers our question, very much so. Now, I will change slightly the order of questions, which I was planning. This could be a good transition for the Northern Lights project. Elise Rock is here with us. She's a senior business development advisor for Northern Light projects. And we started talking about the use of carbon with Mr. Legalland and the CEA. Elise, could you tell us a bit more about Northern Lights project and present to us how the CO2 will be captured, from which source? Thank you very much. Yes, this is my pleasure. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for giving me the floor to talk about our project, Northern Lights. I hope you can see my slides.
Je trouve que c'est quand même plus parlant pour expliquer. Donc, le projet Northern Lights a lieu en Norvège.
This Northern Light project is based in Norway. I'm myself here in Oslo. This is a CCS project, carbon capture and storage. Quickly, here I want to use show you the technologies which we are using. We capture CO2 mainly through combustion, through different processes, with cement making, when we burn waste to release energy and heat. We have smokes going through reactors in contact with solvents. In that way, we are able to capture CO2. We put it under pressure and liquefy it in order to transport it more easily. Once we have transported the CO2 either via pipelines or boat, ship, we will store it in geological storage. That's what we mean by CCS. The Northern Light project that is a public-private partnership project that had subsidies from the Norway government and also private companies, a cemetery, waste incinerators, and also 3 other companies which created this company, Total Energy, Shell, and Equinor, which together created Northern Lights. The longship represents the totality of the chain, with capture close to Oslo, and Northern Lights represents all the transport, intermediate storage, and definite storage part in the Norwegian underground. With our own ships, what we are doing at the moment is that we are building ships that will be able to transport liquefied CO2. These are the first ships of this size in the world that can carry over 7,000 tons of CO2 per trip. These are huge ships, and they will come to the place of capture. They will be charged, loaded with the liquefied CO2, and the ships will then go to our storage terminal. They will first stop at the intermediate storage place. Then we will put the liquefied CO2 in a pipeline over 100 kilometers, going deep at sea to reach the final point of storage, which is at about 2.6 kilometers deep in the sea, where the CO2 will be stored permanently. This project has several phases. What was mentioned by the Norwegian government relates to 1.5 million tons per year, and we've developed another project to reach over 5 million tons per year. Moving on now, just to show you what it looks like, what the terminal looks like, the receiving terminal. We have started the building in Norway, next to Bergen. We are now preparing all the civil engineering works, and this is what it would look like at the end. As you can see, different areas. This is a second phase at the moment. We are getting ready to welcome another storage place. Just one word regarding the storage concept, very important. The whole technology around the storage solutions, which is mainly in the storage concept technology. So what we are doing is that we're storing the CO2. You see on this graphic, the geological structure. You see the sea at the bottom of the sea, 2.6 kilometers down into the ground, the basis of which is in yellow is the main storage. These are sands with salted water. So we will inject the CO2 in the liquid form, and the CO2, there are several mechanisms, of course, involved to capture the CO2 or trap the CO2 in between the grains of sand grains. It will also dissolve in the water like soda drinks. Part of it will dissolve, and part of it will mineralize and be transformed in a solid form. That's how CO2 will be like trapped in this reservoir or main storage space. That's what happens in the storage. We also have sloping aquifer, which also trap. We have a primary seal. These are various layers or seals. The first one stops. That's why we have salted water there that has been there for millions of years, that is trapped, that cannot get away. There is also another formation in which there is oil and gas produced a bit further away on another license. And then you have a second system, if you like, or trapping seal, which is why hydrocarbons have never been able to get out. The CO2 just cannot, it is totally impossible that the CO2 escapes from this. Now, a last slide to show who is this for. Northern Light, therefore, proposes the storage of CO2. Who for? Mainly for these industries that have difficulties to reduce their carbon print, which is inherent to their process. Typically, the cement industry, steel and other metal. Steel production generates a lot of CO2, refineries, waste incineration, refineries that would release sub-products used for human industry. These are all industries which are pivotal for human activities and yet have difficulties reaching a low carbon print. This is what we do. We come and collect the CO2 in their own fumes or smokes in the process and come and store it. I also mentioned quickly that we also meet other innovative technologies, biomass and biofuel, or fertilizer and ammonia, or DAC industries. That's what we try to do for a much long-term future, to have a negative effect on the carbon print, the overall carbon print. For the DAC, for example, that's capturing the CO2 directly in the atmosphere to capture it and keep it in our storage spaces. The purpose here is to act directly on the atmosphere. These are new technologies, innovative technologies, which are very helpful to us. If we want these technologies to be ready and play an important role by 2050, we need to start working along these technologies. Just to show you here the various points of emissions superior to half a million per year. As you can see, many spots, many emitters that we work with. We cannot take our ships lower than Le Havre and not very profitable. So we're working mainly with the northern parts of Europe and northern emitters. That's it for me.
De questions. Alors, juste quand même pour faire un petit point timing, là,
So let's look at the scheduling here. We've used up more than half of this roundtable time. So I would like you to be a little bit more to the point in your answers, and this will allow us to keep maybe 5 minutes for the end to see if we have any Q&A. So, Elise, you spoke about the profitability challenges for your company. What we saw in the report and what Marine said in the introduction, we saw that of the 26 operational CCUS project, which were brought forward by the Global CCS Institute in its publication. I think the up-to-date version was one more than in the report, but at least in these 26 projects, 20 of them were funded by enhanced oil recovery. So it's when you reinsert CO2 in the actual oil wells to increase productivity. So it's being used in fossil fuel extraction, which is maybe an issue. So how do other projects actually stock this CO2 with the goal of never using it? How can this be profitable? So that's the question. How is it possible? Or how does Northern Light have a profitable business model without using EOR? And is it possible to develop profitable large-scale technologies in this framework?
Et surtout, c'est des technologies qui sont ce qu'on appelle CAPEX intensif. Donc, on a besoin de créer des infrastructures de transport et de stockage qui, plus elles sont grosses, et moins vont coûter cher. Donc, aujourd'hui, ce qui se passe, c'est que les États, on a besoin de
nowadays,
subventions.
states need to subsidize, states and the European Union, they have to subsidize. 2 weeks ago, 4 projects which were announced by the Innovation Fund European will be then financed by European subsidies. There's one in France, in Dunkirk. So we need that financial support to really help the investment achieve scale at a certain size. Breivik was one of the cement sites that received all of the funding, which is actually moving forward with its capture, capturing project. So we need a minimum size. We need to have subsidies, which will allow us to invest in the minimum size available. And once we have this, we can then reduce our costs. So nowadays, I spoke about 100 to 250 euros per ton. We saw that the oil cost was about 70 euros, or that the carbon. So we see that the gap is closing. So if the subsidies are more than 70 euros, we know that the price to store CO2 will be beneficial. So we do have these goals concerning reducing carbon footprints, and with the scale economies, we've been able to push down our costs. So we see that in this context, the business case is really developing. Yes, thank you very much. I had a slight IT glitch, but I think I understood or I heard what you said at the beginning. So keep moving forward with the financing question. And I'd like to give the floor to Mr. Masson. We know that a recharge station of hydrogen is much more expensive than a normal petrol station. A hydrogen bus and a combustion bus, we saw that it's 4 to 5 times more expensive for the hydrogen bus than a diesel bus. So this is a question from funding side. How did Grenoble really look after this and manage it? Did the PPP allow you to really face these challenges and solve them? Yes, it's much more expensive. That's obvious. So there's a 300% for the bin lorry is 3%, for a bus it's 2%. So sorry, not percent, but 3 times more expensive, 2 times more expensive, respectively. So we know that storage is very expensive. So all of this has to be funded nowadays. Firstly, by subsidies, not only for the infrastructure itself, and we have been supported through subsidies in this, and also there has to be a subsidization concerning the purchase price that you would pay for a diesel bus compared with the hydrogen bus. So we have a 40% subsidy on that. This is the maximum limit here in France. So that means that the city is taking on the 60% difference. As I've said, they sometimes take it on directly because the city is the owner of these vehicles. And we know that hydrogen costs also have to be factored in because the delegated party has to pay for it. And this is also subsidized. So for 2030, we've been forecasting 100 million as a surplus charge. So it's not a small amount. So we hope we will achieve budget equivalency between depreciation. The first of the bin lorries will be on the street next June. So there will be not very many vehicles on the street, so the production costs will go up, so depreciation will not be able to compensate. So we hope to be able to achieve budget equilibrium at 2027. We know that the actual vehicle cost should go down. Right now, there's only one producer for these bin lorries, but purchase price is quite high. We also know that production is very expensive for the infrastructure. And we hope that the equipment price will go down, and we hope that the hydrogen price will go down also, because we will have enough production capacity later on. Also, the vehicles that we will purchase will have an increased value addition, because they will not have to, we will not have to pay the combustion fuel surcharges, which will come into place soon. So we hope that by 2027, within the rollout, we will be able to achieve somehow parity between hydrogen and the other business or the other types of vehicles. So we hope that that will happen. Thank you very much for these extra points. So when we talk about the cost of hydrogen, we also look at how it's made. So Dijon chose to produce green hydrogen, so which the electricity is generated by green electricity. Another idea is the blue hydrogen model, which will be a type of link up between the two technologies that we've been speaking about since the beginning of this roundtable, which in that case, hydrogen is produced through fossil fuel use, and the emissions of this production will be captured. So I saw that the IEA said that there are about 15 such sites. Julien can tell us what he thinks about the blue hydrogen model. We saw many models and reports which were actually questioning the interest and actual ecological viability of blue hydrogen. So what is the future? How do you see it? And what do you see about the balance between blue and green hydrogen, keeping in mind net zero 2050?
Alors, je recontinue avec mes slides, qui sont d'ailleurs toujours des slides globaux.
So let's soldier on with my slides. As it was very well said, let's look at a wrap-up of current hydrogen production. So the 90 megatons of hydrogen are produced, mostly 59% by natural gas, 20% coal, mainly in China. So blue hydrogen share is 0.7% nowadays, the yellow part here. So the green hydrogen share is more or less negligible. So once again, let's look at the pledged projects for 2030. We're going towards 120 hydrogen megatons produced. So we could maybe add on top 17 megatons. So here on the right, we could see a little bit more blue hydrogen with CCUS here, a little bit more with hydrogen for blue hydrogen, compared to the green hydrogen that you can see here on the left. The blue hydrogen projects are a little bit more advanced comparatively. So we look at the various countries split up here. For green hydrogen, it's usually in the countries that have a lot of renewable energy, especially solar energy, because this will be the main source. And we see that the costs are going down quite notably for solar compared to wind. So what are these countries? Australia has the most pledged projects. Europe is quite important also. For blue hydrogen, there's a lot of projects in North America, Canada, and United States, because they are the leaders in the CCUS technology domains. One of the most important factors is to see the production cost evolution, so the change of production cost. So you can see here the various groups of production within the net zero scenario in same time periods, 2020, 30, and 50. And this is all explained here in the graphs. So you can see here, right nowadays, the green hydrogen production is notably more expensive. It's about $3 to $8 per kilo more expensive than a gray hydrogen production with gas. So it's about $1 per kilo. So there is quite a large gap. So if we add to this mix CCUS, with the main focal point being on natural gas, here the yellow graph, the yellow bars. So blue hydrogen costs between $1 and $2 per kilogram. And we see that with the forecast, it should be about that price. So this cost, this $2 cost limit per kilo, of course, is thought to be comparable. So we think that green energy will be able to come down to about $2 per kilo by 2030. And we think that the cost will go down. So this is my specialty. So the green hydrogen costs here are intermittent production costs. So it's like when you compare production costs of electricity, LCOE, when you compare wind, solar energy, we know that it's guidable. So the production cost is variable for green hydrogen, as I've just spoken, because the wind and solar energies are also variable. So in our Global Hydrogen Review 2021, within the net zero emissions scenario, we see that there are large swaths of the world which will be dependent upon solar energy, and which will actually be able to push down this hydrogen, the green hydrogen cost below $2. You can see there in orange, yellow, and red. So these net zero scenario 2030, pursuant to the cost, depends upon the decrease in the cost of electrolyzers. Our forecasting shows here that it's between 1,000 to 1.8 $1,800 US per kilowatt installed kilowatt. So we can see the price is quite high and the range is very large. So the investment costs is total investment cost is shown here, and we think that the cost should go down quite quickly within this net zero scenario, and it should go below $600. So it's divided by 2 and then by 3 in the next decade. So here on the right, this reduction cost depends upon the scenario. In 2030, if we only keep in mind the announced projects, it's not that great, the decrease. This is what we call the announced pledge scenario, APS. And it's the lowest in the net zero scenario. Why is that? Because if this industrial development is very quick here, then we will attain scale and R&D will keep up. If we don't do that, then the price decrease will be slower. So just to try to wrap everything up in 1 minute here. So let's look at the breakdown, green, blue, hydrogen. I thought it was interesting to put this graph. We can see here a summary of the CCUS projects, which are actually operating about 40 megaton. So we see that there are about 40 projects using EOR. This is in the industrial sector. If we were to follow the APS model, it would be much more, especially in the CCS models. We can see that in the light green part here. So not only for the pledged projects, we have a bit more CCUS projects because they're less cost intensive. It's very obvious. And also for hydrogen supply, in the worldwide hydrogen supply, there is this supply channels that are being put in place worldwide. And we can see that for the blue hydrogen model. And to wrap everything up, for you to look up the split CCUS versus renewable hydrogen, we can see the net zero and APS difference here. We can see a predominance. The scenario 2/3 green and 1/3 blue in 2050. But however, the government pledges are not as ambitious as what we've put here up on the screen. So thank you very much. Before giving the floor to Legalland, let's talk with Madame Roch. What are Northern Lights plans within this context?
Yes, indeed. We are contacting refinery, chemical industries who come to us. And often what we suggest first is the hydrogen production and ammonia production. Yes, indeed. There will be probably CO2 coming from the hydrogen production. Once again, the smokes are very much concentrated in CO2. You have high concentration of CO2, around 20–25%, which means that it's cheaper to capture this CO2 We have many questions in the chat regarding carbon capture. We will use the last few minutes to discuss this. And the use Northern Lights project is to capture the CO2 and sequestrate it to never be seen again. At CEA, you developing the different uses of CO2, is that right? Yes, indeed. What we do is mainly, we are mainly usage oriented rather than the storage aspect. What we do is that we looked at what we can do to use captured CO2, whether from cement industries or other industries. Also, we have direct capture. What Elise was explaining, it's much more diffuse and it's more complicated and not so interested. We also try to recuperate CO2 from decarbonated biomass or farm waste. So this carbon, we combined it to decarbonized hydrogen. We have to make sure that the hydrogen is decarbonated. And from there, what we do is either we developed interest molecules or fuels, sustainable fuels. For example, we have one project, Jupiter Mine, with GRT gas. We work on this project. It could be methanol, sustainable fuels, also for aviation. We have one particular project that we work on for catalytic reactors from CO2 and decarbonated hydrogen are producing sustainable hydrogen or fuels, sorry. It's all a matter of profitability for the business models to be favorable. Now, regarding competitivity, what Julien was showing earlier on for electrolysis, what we have to keep in mind, for example, PV plants, 20 years ago, people were saying it doesn't make sense, too expensive, etc., etc. The last 10 years, the cost has been divided by 10 for PV plants. If you look at a global level, this is a greater energy production comes from PV plants. With efforts in innovation in 10 years, this has become highly competitive. Solar energy is actually the cheapest energy in the world. We see a similar trend with batteries, with the gigafactories of batteries. About 30 of them are planned to be created in Europe. We are seeing similar trends to solar energy, and I'm sure with an accumulative effect of gigafactories, we will make large quantities of electrolyzers and cost will decrease. Whether in Europe or in France, we have recovery plans and hydrogen plan, which will fund many innovations. If we look at business cases, what we see is that with the double effect of gigafactories with innovation, we are seeing that costs will go down tremendously in the coming years. Now, what remains is a time issue because time is precious. At COP26, what we have seen at COP26 are the other challenges, even though there are many initiatives and all other actions. All the things that need to be implemented to reach those goals by 2050 are not yet implemented. Costs will come from other places, but they will be still important. That's why we wanted to dedicate this roundtable and focus this roundtable to these technologies, indeed, we can see that some levers are really reached in order to reach this trajectory. We are now coming to the end of our session. Unfortunately, we have to stop this meeting, but we will maybe take a few more minutes, maybe 5 minutes. Interpreters will have to go, so unfortunately, live translation will stop now. Thank you.
Y a-t-il des études là-dessus? Donc, vous avez montré cette slide où vous parliez de la stabilité de la couche où vous allez injecter le CO2. Est-ce que sur les plaques sismiques, il peut y avoir des répercussions du captage du CO2?
Alors, non, c'est plutôt éventuellement dans le sens inverse. En fait, il faut voir que là, quand je vous montrais, on voyait l'étendue en fait, du CO2 qu'on allait injecter. Et on voit que ça fait peut-être 1 kilomètre carré d'étendue, ce que nous, on va injecter. Donc, c'est minime, c'est vraiment minime par rapport à toute la formation géologique. C'est très, très petit. Il y a de l'activité sismique dans cette zone qui est suivie. Donc, bon, il y a tout un tas de sentinelles qui sont en place et qui nous permettent d'avoir beaucoup d'informations sur comment se comportent ces plaques. Et ce que nous, on fait dans nos études, on fait ce qu'on appelle des Containment Risk Assessment, où en fait, on va simuler sur le réservoir. Donc, on a un modèle numérique du réservoir suite au puits qu'on a foré déjà, parce qu'on a déjà foré un puits, et aux études sismiques qu'on a fait. Donc, on a ce modèle-là et on simule en fait l'évolution justement ce qui pourrait l'évolution des plaques et quel impact ça pourrait avoir sur notre réservoir. Parce que dans l'autre sens, non, il n'y a pas vraiment d'impact. Et on regarde effectivement, est-ce qu'il y a des risques de migration du CO2 au-dessus des pièges géologiques. Et ça, on l'a fait bien avant de pouvoir proposer le service. Donc ça a été fait effectivement en amont pour montrer qu'il n'y avait pas de risque ou des risques négligeables. Et ça, c'est ce qui nous a permis aussi de pouvoir obtenir la licence et de pouvoir proposer ce service de stockage. Donc oui, c'est pris en compte.
OK. Merci pour ces précisions. Une autre question qui avait été posée en début de la table ronde de Kadja El Houdi. Est-ce que la technologie de captage du CO2 est à la portée des pays en développement en matière de coûts et de technologie? Quelle perspective de pénétration de cette stratégie à long terme dans les autres pays en dehors de l'Europe? Alors, je ne sais pas si, Elise, vous voulez aussi répondre à cette question. Julien, tu as peut-être aussi
C'est une question qu'il faudrait parler de ça pendant 2 heures, je pense.
Oui, effectivement. Oui, parce que vous avez parlé du fait que, par exemple, le prix du carbone qui s'envole en Europe, ça permet d'avoir une certaine rentabilité qui commence, en tout cas, on s'approche de la rentabilité.
Alors,
donc,
et déjà, avant le coût, c'est une question d'offre et de demande. Donc, ça veut dire c'est-à-dire de trouver des émetteurs suffisamment gros et ensuite de trouver des stockages. Aujourd'hui, les stockages en mer du Nord, il y en a beaucoup. Aux US, il y en a beaucoup. Il y en a un certain nombre en Asie également. Et il y en a, donc il y a des travaux qui ont commencé à être faits sur l'offshore nigérian. Donc il y a quelque part, là où on va trouver de l'huile et du gaz, on va trouver des réservoirs, des aquifères salins, parce qu'en fait, le système de formation fait que souvent, elles se sont formées au même endroit, les hydrocarbures, et elles ont migré de l'eau vers un réservoir parce qu'elles sont plus légères et beaucoup d'autres. Mais donc, là où on trouve de l'huile et du gaz, on trouve des aquifères salins. Et on peut même d'ailleurs réutiliser, j'en ai pas parlé, mais il y a une autre technologie qui n'est pas la technologie de Northern Lights, il y a une autre technologie de stockage qui est réutiliser des réservoirs existants qui ont été vidés de leur hydrocarbone pour mettre du CO2 à la place. Donc, à partir du moment où on peut trouver un stockage, déjà, on peut proposer une offre et ensuite, il faut avoir des émetteurs qui ne soient pas trop loin. Et donc, effectivement, sur des zones où on a beaucoup d'émissions liées, par exemple, à l'utilisation du charbon pour produire de l'électricité, ça peut être possible. Après, la question, c'est est-ce qu'on veut vraiment continuer à utiliser du charbon pour produire de l'électricité? Et voilà, donc là, on rentre dans des débats peut-être un peu plus complexes.
Oui, en effet. Merci effectivement pour ces précisions. C'est vrai que on a beaucoup de personnes du continent africain dans la communauté Climate Change et c'est toujours intéressant de redonner un peu des perspectives mondiales à ces enjeux. Une dernière question pour finir. Marin Pugna qui demande, avec les progrès de l'électrolyse, est-ce que l'hydrogène pourrait devenir intéressant pour les véhicules plus légers? Donc, je ne sais pas qui veut prendre cette question. Julien, François, Jean-Patrick.
Je peux faire tenter une réponse.
Ouais.
Julien, il a un peu répondu un peu tout à l'heure. Je pense que l'hydrogène, son premier… Alors, il faut juste avoir en tête, voilà, le premier usage et le plus rapide de l'hydrogène, ça va être vraiment la décarbonation de l'industrie. Je pense que ça me paraît vraiment le premier sujet pour l'hydrogène. Après, sur la mobilité, ça va être vraiment en premier lieu tout ce qui est mobilité soit lourde, soit intensive, c'est-à-dire les gros véhicules, ce qui était, voilà, qu'on regarde les véhicules, ce qui est fait à la ville de Dijon, c'est un bon exemple. C'est sur des véhicules soit lourds, soit utilisation intensive, où il faut recharger rapidement, etc. Après, sur les véhicules plus légers, je pense que ça va être compliqué d'avoir du sens par rapport aux batteries, puisque les batteries vont vraiment aller les prix vont baisser assez violentes. Quand on regarde sur les véhicules légers, après, en fait, toute la question sur les véhicules légers, c'est est-ce qu'on va rester sur le modèle actuel, voilà, sur le modèle du véhicule individuel. Voilà. Je pense que entre les sujets de décarbonation, entre les sujets de décongestionnement des centres-villes, avec des progrès aussi de sujets de voitures autonomes, etc., je pense qu'il y a un vrai… Alors là, on va rentrer dans des débats qui peuvent être sociétaux, mais l'usage du véhicule individuel c'est pas impossible qu'il évolue, c'est même probable qu'il évolue dans les années qui viennent. Parce que quand on y réfléchit, un véhicule individuel, c'est utilisé 5 à 10% de son temps. Quand on fait, un financier, un investissement qui est utilisé 5 à 10% de son temps, personne ne le fait. Donc, c'est ce qu'on fait avec nos véhicules. Donc voilà, je pense qu'il y a ce sujet-là, batterie versus hydrogène, et sur les véhicules légers, je pense qu'après, le sujet, il est quand même assez ouvert. Il y a énormément de développement sur les batteries, énormément de développement sur l'hydrogène. Donc, où va se faire la limite entre les deux, mais sur les véhicules un peu plus lourds, il y a des phases d'incertitude. Après, sur les véhicules légers, je pense qu'il y a un sujet aussi sur quels vont être les nouveaux business models. Voilà. Et même de manière plus générale, sur les véhicules électriques, il y a aussi des sujets comme le véhicule to grid, où en fait, les véhicules électriques peuvent servir de réserve et de stockage d'électricité, ce qui va être important, et ils peuvent offrir un service au réseau. Donc, on voit qu'on est quand même sur des choses avec ces sujets de transition énergétique, on va sur l'hydrogène, les batteries, les véhicules autonomes, etc., où des business models peuvent complètement changer. Les acteurs actuels ne seront peut-être pas les acteurs de demain. Et je pense qu'il y a des nouveaux usages et de nouvelles habitudes. Voilà, je pense qu'il y a aussi des changements de sociétaux qui peuvent être derrière tout ça.
Merci pour cette réponse. Effectivement, quand on aborde le sujet des technologies de rupture, ça fait tout de suite appel à plein d'autres sujets. Donc, on a parlé de l'industrie, de la mobilité. Ça fait également aussi ça soulève aussi la question des changements d'habitude, des changements d'usage. On pourrait encore en parler longtemps. Malheureusement, ça fait 10 minutes qu'on a dépassé l'heure de fin de cette table ronde. Donc, c'est le moment de vous dire merci beaucoup à tous les quatre pour vos interventions. J'ai appris beaucoup de choses. J'espère que c'est le cas aussi de tous ceux qui nous ont écoutés ce midi. Je vous souhaite…
moi, en tout cas.
Super. Je vous souhaite à tous une bonne après-midi. Si vous voulez nous retrouver à 15h, on fait la dernière table ronde de la semaine de l'Observatoire sur le rôle des collectivités territoriales, donc un autre sujet tout aussi passionnant où on aura plusieurs personnes de plusieurs continents pour parler du rôle des collectivités territoriales dans la transition. Voilà, en attendant, n'hésitez pas à retrouver sur notre site internet le bilan sectoriel qui a été publié lundi. Aujourd'hui, pour ceux qui sont en France, il y a Alternative économique qui a sorti son numéro de décembre dans lequel vous pouvez retrouver un cahier spécial de 16 pages écrit en partenariat avec nous dans le cadre de la publication de ce bilan sectoriel. Voilà, merci beaucoup à tous. Bon après-midi et à bientôt. Au revoir.
Merci beaucoup.
Merci, au revoir.
Merci.
Au revoir.
Au revoir.